Going medieval with something metal. Here's your look at the new Threezero Transformers The Last Night DLX Autobot Bumblebee. At 8.5 inches tall, the Transformers The Last Night DLX Bumblebee collectible figure features approximately 60 points of articulation, a die-cast metal frame, and LED illuminated eyes. Accessories include the arm cannon, which is interchangeable with the standard right arm, Cybertronian hammer, interchangeable battle mask, detachable wings, and a total of 4 pairs of interchangeable hands. Before we spend some time with Bumblebee from Transformers The Last Night, let me first thank the folks over at Threezero, who in fact made this review possible by sending over the DLX Bumblebee that we can have a look at in this video. Let's go ahead now and grab the tape measure just to see how tall the figure stands. Now, I know at the beginning I'd already said how tall the figure stands, but you know I'm all about just double checking. Taking as well, it gives me also an opportunity to use this tape measure too. DLX Bumblebee, counting the top of his domed head, is actually in fact 8.5 inches in height. And to spin that around, the figure's just a little over 20 centimeters tall. The first couple of things we'll have a look at for Bumblebee is his articulated display stand and his instruction manual. The manual is in fact so big, it's bigger than Bumblebee himself. And inside thoroughly covers the details, like for example the parts that are included with the figure, the parts that are removable, and things that you have to add like the detachable wings, which in this case I've actually already taken the liberty of adding to the back of his torso, and I'll show you how simple that is. Comes included also with a battle mask that would be worn on front of his face, several different pairs of interchangeable hands, of course you have the display stand down below, and the arm cannon that can be swapped out with the right side of his body. On the flip side of the booklet, didn't mean to startle you, shows you all the parts that can be moved on the figure itself. And there's actually quite a lot of articulation here on Bumblebee. If you open up, though, the booklet on the top corner, it shows you where to install the batteries for his eyes to light up. Now, I will say, though, the batteries were not included with the Bumblebee that I received. The batteries that are required in this case are 2 AG13 batteries, which are pretty easy to come by. In fact, you usually can go to places like Amazon and get yourself a small tray of 12 or so for about $10 to $20. And then you end up usually having all these extra batteries laying around. I didn't even have to buy the batteries. I had a couple of AG13 batteries laying around that was able to replace the batteries. He only needs 2 in the top of his domed head in order for the eyes to light up. As I said, the figure also comes included with a DLX display stand, which looking at the stand stays pretty consistent with all the other DLX stands. I don't think they've changed anything to the way they sculpt these bases. Like the base themselves, though hollow on the inside, I think look the exact same as all of the ones that we get before. The only thing that actually usually changes is the part that's down below here. Printed in this case, we've got Threezero and Bumblebee in matching yellows. And then sandwiched in the middle, we've got Transformers The Last Night in white. This can attach to the figure. If you look at the top here, there's a little clip here. If you take the back of the figure and you spin this around, there is a little part to the back of his waist that can be removed. It's not by magnet. It's literally just plugged into the back opening here. And then this plugs onto the back of his torso. It just snaps in place. Now this would be ideal certainly when it comes to displaying the figure. Like if you wanted to have him leaping in the air holding the Cybertronian hammer, you can do that. And a lot of times what I would recommend is, as is already done for us in this review, this pops out. And I find it actually helps, it's easiest to take this off anyways and plug this first into the hole that's provided on the back of his torso, because then you can easily get your hand in there. You don't have to worry about the neck also being in the way of things. Once that's in place, then go back to the display stand and snap it, though snapping is probably not the best word to be using. Plug it conveniently back into place. The weight of the neck alone is more than enough to keep the weight of Bumblebee, which is a lot heavier using that die-cast metal. Keeps him at least levitated. Not likely the way I'm going to be displaying the figure, but yeah, again, if you wanted to have him jumping up in the air with the Cybertronian hammer in hand, you can do that as well. The other thing about the neck is too, I'm just going to put Bumblebee here to the side, is there's some adjustability to it too. So there's this part here that ratchets up and down and basically increases or decreases the incline of the stand. You just literally loosen that up, and then you can bring this forward and back until you get to the place that you want, and then just lower it again to lock it in place. As for the neck itself, this can also extend out too to give you a higher reach as well. And like I said, that usually is a consistent thing, a standard issue, a stock item that always comes included with these DLX releases. Like I was saying though, in preparation of this review, I already took the time and actually added the back doors to Bumblebee. I'm going to flip the figure around so you can see what's going on here. Removing them, they're actually quite easy to plug into place. So sort of have this keyhole opening here. When you look at it, there's a peg and then there's a little lip of plastic that sticks out down below. So when you fit it in, not only are you relying then on the opening of the hole, but also that slot holds everything well. So far enough in that you get it, the wings don't move anywhere on you. There is some posability on these. These actually are ratcheted, or not ratcheted, they're hinged where you can move these back and forth. I'm kind of content really with where they are right now, but yeah, if you wanted to bring them down, the thing about it I'm worried about though is just the fact the way they've screwed that in place. Not that it's thin plastic, but just the tension on that could be too strong that moving this back and forth could actually cause a little bit of warping in the plastic or even cracking it. So like I said, I'm probably content to leave it where it is. Because of the way that slot's also in place, it also does eliminate any articulation for the wings. So when it comes to displaying Bumblebee, the wings are always going to look the same. Just going to remove Bumblebee's head here for a second. It may seem a little startling. Going to grab Bumblebee's head. And first of all, the thing I like about the head is that he does have the little flaps on the back of his helmet that can actually lift up. When you first take this guy out of the packaging, his head's going to look like this. So you just go to the back here and take these and flip them up. You just want to be careful though when you move in the head that you don't put pressure against these because they could likely snap. For the installation though of the batteries, you have to take this whole part off, this whole yellow part of his helmet off. You can't just take it off as it is right now. There's going to be resistance because on the bottom of it, there's a screw that you first have to unscrew. Once that's unscrewed, then you can easily just take the whole top of his head off to gain access to the battery compartment and install those two mentioned AG13 batteries. Once those are installed, you're going to go to where the Autobot logo is and you're going to press against it. And as you can see how brightly those eyes illuminate. Not likely going to be what I'm going to have long term because, of course, the longer you have these eyes going for, the dimmer they start to get. But for certainly the purpose of this right now, I really like the way that those eyes look, especially on his head. And again, just to turn it back off, you're going to press that button again to switch those eyes off. As for Bumblebee's accessories, we'll first have a look at the figure's swappable hands. As it goes right now, currently, in the sockets of his forearms, he does have closed fists. But if you want something a little bit more interesting than just closed fists, then they give you a pair of partially relaxed hands. And the detail work on just the hands alone, while they do sacrifice the articulation to them, more than make up for it, at least in the sculpting and the way that they've been painted. If you look at them, they're using more of a dark, kind of brownish gunmetal gray. And then, of course, the individual knuckle parts, the mid-finger portions, are all done in more of a kind of off yellow with a little bit of tarnished color added in there as well. So nothing looks really clean and pristine here on Bumblebee, but you get a pair of those. The figure also comes with a pair of fully relaxed flat hands, flat palms. And again, the detail work done to all these hands themselves, you can see really nicely handled by Threezero. The figure also comes included with grabbing hands, hands specifically designed to hold the Cybertronian hammer. The thing about the hands, though, is while looking at them, you'll notice where they decided to put the holes. Instead of having them at the top where I would expect normally those holes to be, they've instead plugged them onto the side of the hand. So when it comes to changing the hands, we're going to first of all remove the fists right now, which, by the way, just wiggle back and forth. You know what? Let's just pick the figure up so you can see what's going on here. These just wiggle off the posts, and even like the fists are done the exact same way. They put the hand, although it's not as big of an issue when it comes to closed fists, but when it comes to like the hands that hold the hammer, normally I would expect to almost put it in this way, right? But because this part right here doesn't have a hinge joint, what they decided to do instead is not have the hand this way, but actually have it angled this way. So when it comes to him displayed with the hammer, his hands are always going to be facing inward, always like that. I do wish that they could have possibly given us a second pair of gripping hands, ones that instead of having the hole onto the side like this, could have in fact had the hole on the top. So you could have had two different ways of displaying the hammer. To me, looking at it, it looks a little awkward that his hand is always curved inward instead of having them standing straight out, having them arched straight out. Of course, like I said, those are for holding the Cybertronian hammer, which I'll have a look at right now. Love the design of this hammer. The top's actually the actual head portion of the hammer. If you look at it this way, kind of looks like the towers to a castle. I wonder if that was intentional or not. It's got some really nice looking paintwork done to it, primarily all more of a chrome finish, with again that more tarnished yellow that they've added in certain portions of it. Now again, like this, to fit into his hand, it's usually best to recommend, I would recommend at least, take the hand off first. And as it does, it squeaks and creaks, but go ahead then, and the fingers themselves are more of a softer plastic. So you're not going to have so much the issue of getting the hammer in his hands. You're actually going to have more of a harder time of actually getting the hands back into the sockets. Because again, I want to kind of consider putting the hand in this way, but you have to put it in this way. Let's just wiggle that back into place. So when you're looking at Bumblebee with him wielding the hammer, I don't know, it does look a little off, doesn't it? Just because I'm so used to seeing figures usually just with having their hands being continuous, just a continuous extension from the form. And in this case, you actually got the hands more angled inward. I guess they've done it also this way too, that if you wanted to wield the hammer in both of his hands, you can actually do that as well. You can bring those arms inward and having him carrying the hammer. And that's probably one of the reasons too why they had the hands angled inward instead of having them hanging out straight. The figure also comes included, let's just take the hammer out of his hand here. The figure also comes included with a clip. Now this clip fits actually onto the back of the figure. And what you have to do is you have to untab these first, take the wings off, remove them freely. Not so freely. Or you can try to get them in there too. Like the idea is these little parts of the handcuff, see how they're half circles? They're going to actually fit over top. Now you can either do it with or without. I'm going to try to do it with keeping the wings still in place. But what they do is they fit over top of those openings. So where you put those wings in, that little clip, I'm going to do it with the wings still in place. See if we can actually put that without having to remove it. The thing about it though is it doesn't give you a lot of space, but then you can take then the hammer, and like I had done with the hands, if you find it's easier, you can do it and then put the clip in place. But the clip is there just to keep the hammer out of the way. So there's a way to place it and display it on Bumblebee if you don't want to have it necessarily in his hands. You can also have it a little bit further down too as well, but let's just bring this down just a little bit. I want to get it past at least the wings. There we go. And just bring it down a little bit further. Yeah, I probably would have it more closer to being about there. That looks a little bit better. The other thing that the figure also comes included with is his face shield. I'll go ahead and pick that up right now. Bumblebees from the films always tend to have the face guard that flips down on the front of his face. And in this case, they've also done this for the Last Knight too. Still replicating that yellow that they've used for the majority of his body. He also does have sort of these translucent shades in front. And it really does give him a very insect look. Now this, I thought would have been attached by magnets, but there's actually a clip on the inside right here. Not that you have to apply a lot of force. You literally just snap that onto the front of his face. It's very easy to remove. I mean, you don't really have to even rely on those clips, but the clips are supposed to fit on the sides of his eyes. But again, just a little bit of pressure is more than enough to keep that in place. And you can also then turn on the eyes and still see his eyes illuminating on the inside of the shades. Personally speaking, I would rather have Bumblebee displayed without the face guard myself. Another option they could have had was had it built in, but that would be impossible to replicate on the head. It makes much more better sense, I think, just to have that as something that would just attach onto his face rather than something that would have to flip down from the top of his head. The last thing that the figure comes included with accessory-wise is his arm cannon, intended to be on the right side of his body. It plugs into place. There's a little hole on the top of it, but before we actually plug it in, I wanted to show you what it looks like. A very intricately sculpted arm cannon, using still that dark gunmetal gray that makes up the majority of his body, with again, you've got that same mirrored color of yellow. That would have actually still been the same yellow that he has currently on the guards of his arms. So they are exactly the same. To change these out, what I'm actually going to do first is just remove the faceplate. I'm going to turn off, of course, his eyes because I don't want to be draining the batteries. And I'm also going to remove the back clip here, just because I don't. The more that I can actually have removed from the figure, the less hassle I'm going to have with taking the arm and trying to remove it. But anyways, what you are going to do is take the figure's arm, and once again, you're going to be removing, but you're going to detach it right here. So instead of removing the hands, you're going to be removing the arm right at this dividing split. Just hold on to the bicep, wiggle this back and forth, and you're going to want to remove it completely from the peg. You bear with me while I'm doing this. There we go. Just unplug that. And then you can just recreate the same steps, but in reverse. So you're going to wiggle that back onto the post. I do find it helps just to wiggle it as you're putting in place. You don't want to force it because there are a few little sensitive places on this that could potentially break. And there's Bumblebee, what he looks like with the arm cannon. And again, just for the sake of it, let's also put his faceplate back on. Whoops, let's put his faceplate back on. Let's try that again. And we'll turn on the eyes. Might even just want to, there we go. Perfect. So that's what Bumblebee looks like with his face guard down and his arm cannon. Definitely a way I would consider to display the figure. Maybe not necessarily with the faceplate on the front of his face, but I do like the idea of displaying him with the arm cannon. It does look quite intimidating on the figure. Having looked at now all of the accessories to come include with Bumblebee, let's get a closer look at the figure. As we've already discussed, he certainly does have still the light up eyes, which once again can be accessible by simply pressing that Autobot symbol on the front of his face. Capturing very much the likeness that Bumblebee does have from the films. He stays pretty consistent with his look, even right down to the standalone Bumblebee movie. Like, they don't change his face all that much. I like the look of Bumblebee personally. The coloring is really good on this one. You've got, again, that gunmetal gray. The tarnished yellow is the thing I like the most about this figure. So all the portions, all the parts and sections of Bumblebee's body that normally would just be regular yellow, they have in fact, gone in there and added the tarnished coloring of the browns and the washes of the black, just to make it look a little darker and dingier. Of course, he does have, again, the ears, the little ear parts that do flip up. So these do flip up. And I guess that really would have been the smarter route anyways than just permanently sculpting them up. If you did want to have them slightly a little more scared, you can bring them back a little bit. Again, or you can just bring them forward too. Now we're going to look at more of the articulation on Bumblebee here more in a moment. But again, like all the detail work that they did to the neck there. The neck, by the way, is on its own independent ball joint. So not only do you benefit from having the ball joint actually in Bumblebee's head, he also has it also in his neck too, which, again, we'll talk more about in a second. There are a few little things actually on Bumblebee. I was surprised to see how many things actually could move. Like little front flaps, for example, that just above the front bumper of his grille. Again, you got some nice coloring added in there. It looks as if they've used likely a see-through translucent plastic for the front of his headlights. All of his body actually is also metal, and you'll notice it right away when you pick this figure up. It has the weight, but it has right as well the cool to the touch indicator that they are using metal. Primarily, most of the metal seems localized to its legs. He still has it in his body, but I feel like more of the weight, obviously, for more of what they're using of the material, is more localized in his legs. Of course, we have the arm cannon there. I kept it on for the time being because, of course, at least you get the chance to see what he looks like with his regular robot arm and then what he looks like with his cannon arm. Again, very, very nicely detailed. You see like little additional parts of color that they've added in there. Some much needed, much appreciated reds and silvers added in there as well. You've got some nice little additional gold on the inside sections of his shoulders that are moving in and out. Again, we'll look at more of the articulation in a second. He does have the little wheels on the back here as well. Also have posability going for him. I know we've already discussed the fact he does have the wings. There's no posability going for those other than just the bottom flaps. You can move those back and forth. But again, a really super detailed replica of what Bumblebee looks like from The Last Night. Not even specifically from The Last Night either. I mean, really, it does capture so well what Bumblebee looks like across all the entire Bayverse films. Again, he's got some really intricate detailing done to the interior there of his thighs as I try my best to move his legs out of his way. You can kind of see all the extra working that they've done to the sculpting here. Again, like this all feels like metal, especially like down below here on his legs. The legs, a little harder though to see. In his feet, he actually does have the tires. And while they don't spin necessarily back and forth, they actually do serve as also an articulation point, which is also where the figure actually moves his feet back and forth. I think that's a fun way to add the articulation by incorporating that as part of his wheel as well. For the figure's articulation, let's have a look at that right now. And I'm hoping I'm going to be able to cover everything properly. Of course, we've already looked at the fact he does have the head articulation, so that can somewhat somewhat rotate all the way around. It does look up and down, and of course you can rock it back and forth. But in addition to that, Bumblebee also does have a secondary ball joint just at the base of his neck. Try not to get my fingers in the way. That does allow for at least the robot to have a lower looking look, or you can also have it looking higher up as well. So quite a lot of range of motion here for Bumblebee. The figure does also have a waist swivel. The thing about the waist swivel, though, is you just want to make sure like these flaps are kind of out of the way when you are swiveling the waist, because there is only a potential risk of this moving too far forward, back and forth this way, that you clip this in the process. The figure also does, like I said, have an upper torso ball joint, so you can not really move it back and forth this way, but you can kind of move it up and down this way as well. And like I said, he does have the lower articulation there also in his waist too. So between like the two, you can get quite a lot going for Bumblebee. Quickly spinning the figure around, there's the articulation here on the back where his tires can move in and out. So if you'd rather have the wheels a little bit more closer to his body, you can do that. And even like the tires themselves, though they hinge back and forth close to his body, they are actually also articulated by a ball joint that attaches to the inside of the tires. So those can also hinge out too. Like I said, there is a lot to cover off here on Bumblebee. Like he does have the articulation here in the back, bottom, butt flaps, so to speak, on Bumblebee's body. For his hands, for his arms, you can rotate his arms forward and back this way. You can see like he also does have a crunch on the inside of his shoulders. So not only can you move his arms forward and back this way, but you can also arch them out or bring them inward also as well. Figure does have a bicep swivel further up closer to the point where it attaches to the shoulder section. Figure does have a a double hinge on his elbow. And even though I have forfeited his forearm on this side, at least on the articulation on this side, the figure does have a swivel in his forearm right here. And he does also have a swivel in his hands, even though we're sticking with the hammer hands for the time being. He does have also articulation here on the top. I think it's more so just the way it was assembled to the figure. Legs split out. And you can take the legs and move them forward and back. Just be careful of that section right there. He has a swivel also where that's attached to the joint right at the top of his thigh. Again, looking at that. Double hinge on the knee, so he's got the one, and he's got a secondary one a little bit lower underneath his knee guard, or knee plate there. So he has double hinges there. Figure has articulation. I know we're still going. The figure has articulation also in his ankle. He does also possess an ankle rocker. And the figure also has toe articulation as well. Man, I really hope I covered off everything. As it certainly goes for this figure. I mean, I have said this also before in the past. This is correct his flaps here. While this is not necessarily a figure that can transform, don't let that be a deal breaker for you, because really what Threezero are doing with their DLX Transformer line is something spectacular. You get movie accurate designs of all the characters. Bumblebee looks like he was taken right from the screen. They have put him, of course, with a metal frame. So right away, you get that real solid, heavy weighted feel for Bumblebee. And of course, all the additional paintwork that they've done to all the plates of yellow over top of that metal body gives you, again, a very realistic looking Bumblebee. And again, there's always the option as well of displaying him with the faceplate that can go over top of the existing face. But the way I like the Bumblebee to look in the movie, I mean, I like the idea of him having that guard that it comes down when he's ready to go into battle, but I always prefer to have Bumblebee more the OG look with his eyes illuminated. And I gotta say as well, like, illuminating the eyes is super easy on this guy. You don't have to kind of get in there. You don't have to unscrew plates to gain access to a light switch. It's simple. It's easy. I wish more companies could just do it like this. Just have a button on the front of the face where you can just press it in, turn it on and off if you want to. The figure also, like I said, comes included with a hammer too, and have that displayed either in his hand or on the back of his torso. Yeah. I think Threezero has done a really great job here with The Last Knight. Transformers The Last Knight. Bumblebee DLX. If I could be completely honest, I wasn't even a big fan of Transformers The Last Knight either. All my problems and nitpicks with the franchise as a whole seem to magnify even more with Transformers The Last Knight. And I know we can't be looking at continuity when it comes from one sequel to another. It just seems to always change with all of the Bayverse Transformers. But yet, Transformers The Last Knight seemed to just even take the continuity concept and throw it completely out the window. Despite whatever my feelings may be of Transformers The Last Knight, I gotta say, like, Threezero has handled a really nice Bumblebee. It doesn't even have to necessarily be attached to The Last Knight either. Don't let the name Transformers The Last Knight be any bit of a deterrent as to why you wouldn't want to pick up this collectible in the first place. Yes, it's Bumblebee from Transformers The Last Knight. But really, how close the designs are from one sequel to the other anyways. This Bumblebee could easily be pulled from any one of the franchise sequels that came before Last Knight. It's just too good of a figure not to want to pick up. The thing that continues to astonish me when it comes to Threezero releases too is the fact that they continue to put out high-end collectibles at such an affordable price. I think Bumblebee, in fact, is under a $200 price point. Try to find that with another rivaling 6-scale company and see what they're charging for a 6-scale figure of this size and using metal. You'd probably be looking at a figure that's well into $300 and almost closer to $400, I think, for a figure of this size and this amount of metal. I mean, the thing I like about the Bumblebee figures, and really across all of the DLX figures that we've been looking at here on this channel, is the moment you take it out of the box, it has the weight and it has that feel of a high-end collectible. But again, for what Threezero are putting these figures out constantly under $200, you really can't beat that. Whether you are a fan of The Last Knight or not, there's certainly no denying. I would hate to think there's any denying that this is a really cool-looking Autobot Bumblebee. It doesn't transform. No, it doesn't turn into an alternate mode of a Camaro. But again, like, if you're just going to have this figure displayed as a robot anyways, why does it have to transform into an alt mode? If your plan is only to pick up a transformer, transform it back into a robot, and leave it on the shelf as a robot, you're getting a much better collectible here from Threezero. A great-looking Bumblebee. Not a great film that he's based from, but still a great-looking Bumblebee putting on the shelf. Superposable, tons of accessories, tons of different ways of displaying him, and the fact he does have LED light-up eyes. Just great work done by Threezero. What do you guys think of this figure? Let me know down below in the comments section. Is the DLX Bumblebee a figure that you would pick up and add to your collection if you're a big Transformers fan? And a big thank you once again to the folks over at Threezero that did provide the sample of DLX Bumblebee from Transformers The Last Knight. Not the better of the sequels for Transformer films. But they were kind enough to send over the Transformers Bumblebee, a Transformers DLX Bumblebee from Transformers Last Night. If you guys are new to this channel, you're enjoying the content that you're seeing, love the fact that we are doing some more Transformer reviews here from Threezero. If you are new here, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button down below. If you are new here, making sure you're turning on the bell notification and popping up at the very end of this video. If you did want to partake in any more reviews that I've done for Threezero and specifically Transformers, at the very end of this video will be popping up a playlist of all the other things I've looked at from Threezero. Feel free to give that a gander if you have a little bit of time on your hands. We're going to be looking at more Threezero releases, so make sure you're staying tuned to this channel regularly. And as always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.